हमारे वक्त की धड़कन, हमारा चिंतन, हमारी भावनाएं, हमारे विचार, कभी कोमल बातचीत तो कभी इंटरेक्शन तेज तर्रार। तय करें मिलकर व्हाट इज रॉन्ग, व्हाट इज राइट। ITV पर अशोक व्यास के साथ इनसाइट टुनाइट।
Namaskar, I'm Ashok Vyas. Today is 12th January and the day is observed as National Youth Day, the day dedicated to the energy of youth, and India is full of young and dynamic energy these days. This day takes its root for this reference from the birthday of Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda has special relationship with America also, because it was in 1893 that he came to address Parliament of Religion at Chicago, and when he said brothers and sisters of America, people stood up and they clapped for many minutes together. What was it that electrified the audience when he said those words, brothers and sisters of America? When we try to understand how we communicate, and there are many layers, many levels at which we communicate, it is important where we are coming from. What is it that we intend to accomplish when we utter a word? And I have the pleasure of welcoming two ladies who are working with their understanding in making others understand how to find purpose. So to make this purposeful show and observe the birthday of Swami Vivekananda, let me have the pleasure of welcoming, first of all, someone whose book also is known as Standing Ovation. So that reminded me of Swami Vivekananda again. Robyn Hatcher is with us, communication coach. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be back.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And I'm glad today you are joined with another young lady who has tried to understand life in her own way with all its ups and downs, and she shares her understanding through various ways, as a speaker as well as by presenting her ideas through television and many mediums. And also she is founder of an interesting and innovative organization. I'll go first, so let me have now the second opportunity of introducing Jessica Minhas. Jessica, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Jessica, let's begin with you and keeping the word purpose. Everybody seems to be doing fine in terms of, if you call anybody, how are you? In third or fourth sentence, you'll hear they'll say busy, busy, busy. So if people are busy, that means they have found purpose, or that doesn't necessarily mean that they have found a purpose?
I would say that that means that they're still trying to figure it out. Robyn, I know this is like your specialty as well, but to say that you're busy is really to say, like, I'm too busy to stop and sit for a minute and get still with myself and ask myself, what is it that I really want? What is it that I want for my future? Where am I going? Am I on the right path or not?
So, Robyn, take it from there.
Yeah, it's like you're so right. People are always so busy, and it's a distraction. I feel like we get busy and we get so distracted that we lose track of what our purpose is. And our purpose in life, I mean, we all have a particular purpose, I believe. That we have a purpose to do good, to really bring what is inside of us out to share with the world. We have a purpose and we need to share it with the world. When you're busy, you're not necessarily sharing your purpose or sharing your impact with the world. What you're doing is getting stuff done. But getting stuff done doesn't necessarily translate into enriching another person's life or even growing your own life. So that's why we're in this whole society of busyness is not really being effective with what it is that you're doing. You need to have a choice and choose what it is that you're going to do. Have the purpose be first, get that done, and then you also can have time to enjoy it, because that's part of life too.
Wonderful. So you have the choice. When Robyn says it, many times people feel happy because they start forgetting that they have a choice. It's like a mechanical routine which becomes a part that defines the way we live. And with so much technology around us, distractions are increasing, the ability to concentrate is decreasing. What way one may use one's mind to be able to concentrate, that somehow was the key theme for Swami Vivekananda also when he was here, as well as of course when he was in India. Talking about Swami Vivekananda, we have a small clip where Sadhu Jaggi Vasudevaji shares how he connected with the Western mind. He here means Swami Vivekananda. Take a look.
You heard of Vivekananda? He's the first yogi who came to this country in 1893 and made a little bit of waves in those days. So he also went to Europe on his way back from United States and happened to be a guest of a German philosopher. And after dinner they met in the study and they were discussing this and that, and there was a large book on his table which was over 700 pages. So Vivekananda said, because the man was speaking very highly about the book, he said, "Can you give me that book for an hour? Let me see what is there in it." That man laughed. He said, "In 1 hour you're going to read this book? I have been reading it for weeks and not getting anywhere because it's so complex. And that too, it's in German language. You don't even know the language. What will you do with it in an hour?" Vivekananda said, "You give it to me for an hour, let me see." So the book was given to him. He took the book and placed it between his two hands and just sat there with his eyes closed. After 1 hour, he took the book and gave it to him and said, "This doesn't have anything significant in it." That man thought, this is the peak of arrogance. You don't even open the book and you make a comment about the book, a book which is in a language that you do not know. So he was a little put off by this and he says, "What is this nonsense?" Vivekananda said, "You ask me anything about the book, I'll tell you." Okay, in page 633, what is there? Verbatim, Vivekananda repeats. You ask any page, just number the page, he will tell you what is there word by word on every page. Then he asked, "How is this? You didn't even open the book. How is this possible?" He said, "That's why they call me Vivekananda." Viveka means perception. His name is Narendra. His guru called him Vivekananda because of his ability to perceive. So he said, "That's why I'm called Vivekananda." So perception of life is not… you cannot all process it through your logical mind. It doesn't work like that because logic will filter out so much of your life without which you cannot live.
Talking about logic, and also we are talking about logical way of growing and increasing the enriching way of relating to life, and in that connection, how one responds to the challenges that are offered to us on day-to-day basis. Who can better share a light about it than the CEO and founder of I Will Go First. So sometimes stories also help, Jessica, I think, and you figured it out and you are connecting with stories in a way where they become a tool of empowerment. Share with us about this idea.
Well, so I've worked domestically here in the States and then also internationally, and something that I kept finding was that in my work with sex trafficking victims and also gender-based violence victims, the people who have experienced domestic violence in their homes, they would always want to share their story. They'd always want to talk about it. And I started getting really interested in the neuropsychology behind what's happening when we share a story, what's happening in our brains. And I started to realize that actually people who experience trauma or abuse, and that manifests itself with PTSD, and we hear about that all the time in the news with veterans, that they're experiencing PTSD, stories actually help reintegrate the brain and help create new neural pathways. So even on this, like one level, this entertainment level, we see stories in the media and the movies babies and we love them and we're so excited about them. But then even on a deeper psychological level and a healing level, stories have this potential to really change our lives. And so for I'll Go First, the message is really to ask you to own your story. And that's not just for show, that's also to say there's so much healing that can happen when we go back over our history and really push into the places where we're afraid of. And it's in those places that I think that kind of helps unlock the purpose component, which again is like, Robyn's specialty. But purpose, for me at least, purpose can only be really truly embraced when we're free from holding all the shame and the pain and maybe that's holding us back, when we have free hands to embrace the future before us. So we help people put words to what they can't put words to. So much trauma and abuse is so hard to define. It's so confusing. So we help people do that. And then we help point them in a direction to say, okay, great, now you've worked through what you need to work through. Go live this great life and really help the world.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So,
And that's why
Continue.
Jessica and I are so great, and that's why I loved her when we first met, because all of that brain work that Jessica is talking about, I do when I work with people just on learning how to communicate better. Like, what is your story? Like, articulating your story, because you can create more neural pathways as you go. It's like if you have this story that you're shy and that you can't communicate, or that I can't be assertive, that's the story that you live with. But when you start to create a different story, you can create a whole different connection in your brain, and then you let it out. And we became, part of how we became who we are is because we both told a lot of stories as actors way back in our lives, and still do. So acting is a
Robyn,
huge
I wanted
thing.
to interrupt, and please continue where you are at the moment. But in general, we hear ideas that if you focus more on negativity, then you are strengthening negativity. And if you focus on the positive, then the positive gets strengthened. But there is a fine line to understand. Whether you are in a denial mode or you are focusing on positive side of life with full understanding of the existence of negative side of life.
Right. Yeah, that's an excellent point, because there's a lot out there about positive psychology and just be happy, and that doesn't necessarily work. I mean, the work that Jessica is doing is like, until you own your story, get it out there, share it, and then reframe it in a way that says, I can still have a life, I can still be positive. That's what works. just as an analogy, if you have a huge hole in your floor and you take masking tape and just tape it over and then paint over it, it could look great for a couple of days, but if somebody walks on top of it, they're going to go right through the hole. So one of the things that you need to do is really own what it is and fill the hole with something that is substantive, something that is new, something that is richer, and fill that hole so that then you can build on top of it.
So talking about something substantial and something which is stylish, and sometimes we get caught in the style because this is a world where we are every day bombarded with images that are attractive, or presentations which are full of glamour and fine editing skills. So Jessica, substance versus style, how to find balance?
I think we resonate the most with people who are authentic, when they're their real selves. I bet even as an actor and a model, it's hard nowadays in media. It is really challenging, and I really empathize this, particularly for teenagers and parents of teenagers, and what a struggle it is to try and influence your child and say, hey, there's more to life, and go pursue what you're passionate about, find out what you're passionate about, go pursue it, and then deal with whatever is holding you back. In light of seeing, gossip TV and gossip and magazines and all of the airbrushing that's done, it can really be challenging, I think, on your psyche, not just for girls but also for men, I would say.
I would say for all individuals, beyond gender, because these kind of impressions are knocking on everybody's door. Everybody's attention is drawn towards what is being offered. Now, you earlier mentioned about our ability to make choice, which is a very, very important and key factor. If you look at where you derive your strength. If you are just walking with closed eyes, there's no choice, just doing, then you are not living to your full potential.
Right.
So now the question is, what prevents us from actually being the actor and not the reactor? So most of the time, it is just the reaction that is taking our energy.
Right. And that goes back to the original, what is your purpose? What are you on earth to do? Because when you have a goal, it's like, this is my purpose in life, I'm going to share this, my purpose in life is to help people communicate better. So when something gets in the way that says, that takes me off point, I have a choice to go back to my original purpose. When you don't have that purpose, if somebody asks me to, start working in a restaurant or something, cooking food, it's like, that's not my mission. So I know that I can say no to that. But when you're not in tune with what it is that you have as a mission, it's very easy to get distracted. And that's what's so important, is like, we have a choice of like, this is where I want to spend my time. This is going in the direction of my mission. This is taking me away from my mission. And we also have a choice of to see the positive or to see the negative. That's what we were talking about before. It's like, yes, some people have some really horrible things happen to them. They could then have that choice of sinking into it and not talking about it, not dealing with it, or using it to hide. Instead, or they can have a choice to say, I'm going to use this to enrich my life. I'm going to use this to share, and I'm going to use it to grow and to become something else. And so those are the things that I love to focus on. It's like, what are your choice in this moment? And it's all in the moment. And we have a choice of what type of person to be. Even that whole idea about being authentic, I love the idea, but sometimes authentic or being ourselves is not effective. So I really have a real strong, in my line of work, what I do is I help people be effective communicators. Sometimes being yourself is not effective. So how do you then up-level that? How do you then polish that so that you can then be real and effective in the way that you present yourself?
So be effective, and how to be effective, then probably you add certain techniques to what you are presenting, through words, through your gestures, and there is a complete whole of words, facial expressions, your mannerism, how you can tailor that to be as effective as you should be. That is where lies the expertise of Robyn, but the expertise of Jessica also lies along with it in helping people connect with their own story. Let us talk about your story, Jessica, and it is sometimes difficult to, if you are trying to hide it, push it aside, something which is not full of joy, then have you come across people where it is difficult to get to the real story? And if you talk about your own experience.
I think we've all met people in our lives that we meet them and we're like, something isn't adding up here, because you are presenting yourself as if like everything's okay, and you're operating as if you are on this very shallow level. There's like lacks depth, and I think, Robyn, what you were saying is, it's a great point. Like, it's just not sustainable over time. That masking tape that you put on the floor is not really sustainable. And for myself, I grew up in a household in which it was a single parent household. My grandfather raised me, and it was very challenging for him, and he tried his best, but he was an alcoholic. So, up until 11 a.m. in the morning, he was the kindest man you ever met, but then after 11 a.m. he became a totally different person. And I really, I was the overachiever, so I was that person that you met that was like doing everything to run away. Busy. I was busy. I was very, very busy. And then I started working in India, actually, while on the way looking for my biological family, because I was raised by just my German grandfather, so obviously I don't look German. And when I graduated from high school and then college, I was like, I need to go to India and try and find this other side of my family. And that's when I started meeting young women who had who had been rescued from sex trafficking. And it was only until I started hearing their stories that I was reconsidering what my story was, because up until that point I was that girl that was like, oh, everything's fine, you know, everything's great. Like I was a fine childhood, but I was really operating at a shortage. I didn't know my purpose, I didn't know what direction to go, and I didn't feel like I had the permission to. So all the positive self-talk that we were just talking about, you know, just positive psychology wasn't working for me, because I would say, oh, my life is great, but then on the inside I was like, no, I feel really sad. And so it was creating a shame cycle actually for me. Have you seen that as well?
Yeah. It's the shame cycle. Yeah. I was in a book called Dancing at the Shame Prom. That was 22 essays about women writing about shame, and it's like it does become cyclical, because you're hiding something, and then you meet somebody and you think that they see that you're hiding something, so you're ashamed of being called out. So it becomes really a vicious cycle of shame upon shame. And shame is one of the most insidious, most dangerous emotions out there, because it's so hidden, and it really eats away at you. And so many of us carry shame with us, and when you're carrying shame, it's very difficult to accomplish a lot of things. It's very difficult to be productive, because you always feel like you're hiding something. And like you were saying, Jessica, when somebody meets you, we have this intuitive nature, which gets me to the point, like, one of the things I wanted to talk about in that video is what he was talking about perception. Is like, what we really need to get more in touch with is our intuitive nature. And when we're busy and busy and busy, we lose track of what we intuitively know about life and ourselves. And so and when we interact with people, we intuitively pick things up. So when you meet somebody that is hiding a bit of shame, that intuition that Jess was talking about, it's like, I don't know what's wrong, but there's something off. I don't really like that.
This intuitive picking up is quite interesting. And how do you know what you are picking up intuitively is in alignment with the truth? There could be some false perception on the part of the perceiver. How to accept yourself as you are? We'll talk about that right after this short break. Stay with us. How many minutes?
21. Wow, 21 already.
Left? Done. Okay.
That's crazy. 21 minutes already?
Yeah,
Okay.
been talking.
Wow.
No, one second. Welcome back. You are watching Inside Tonight with Ashok Vyas, and as we are celebrating birthday of Swami Vivekananda with two young ladies who have dedicated their energy, their focus in not only understanding purpose of their own lives, but also in helping others follow that side where they feel a sense of fulfillment and enrichment by becoming clear about what they are doing. And right before the break, we were talking about the need to hide something, and that need becomes so much a part of us, Robyn, that if that is taken away, one would feel lost, one would feel shattered. So that period where this transformation is happening from what you have pretended to be and you are walking towards what you actually are, you would feel very, very vulnerable. Have you seen people in that state?
Yeah, it's a very vulnerable feeling. I've gone through it myself. It's like, and we go through periods and layers, like we shed something, and what I liken it to sometimes is an onion. You know, you peel off one layer, it's like, oh, that hurts so much. It's like, oh my gosh, they're seeing this, and then all of a sudden, what they're seeing, you step into, and you think, wow, this is cool. I really like being this. I like being this person. And then all of a sudden, you're doing some more work, and it's like, oh, there's another layer there. There's another layer that can go on, and it's scary. And it's like, oh, but no one notices that layer. You could easily say to yourself, no one notices, I don't need to take it off. But they do. And not only do they notice it, but you feel differently when you take it off. It's like, that feeling is like when you're sitting there and you're talking to somebody or interact with somebody and you're stopping yourself. You're not really being fully present because that thin layer of skin is still covering you. And so it can be a really long process of peeling layer off layer so that you can be vulnerable and then trust trust is a huge part of it. Trust that no one is going to take advantage of you because of that.
Hard.
Because what it is that this is who I am, this is what I'm sharing. Do you like it? You don't like it? I'm sorry, but this is what I have to share with you.
So that requires tremendous amount of courage and of course commitment, that you have to take this step where you are one with yourself, one with your true self. Jessica, share with us your own experience in this particular phase when that transition was happening. It could be quite painful also. There must be a lot of sense of insecurity added to the layer of experience.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when you were talking, Robyn, about this courage to trust and like this courage to reach out and be as you are in front of people. And at least for someone who's experienced trauma, I know this is true in my personal history and those that I've worked with, that's really terrifying. I don't even have the words for it. It's terrifying because you've been told one thing, that your intuition is wrong. Like if you're in a domestic violence situation, you're being told by the perpetrator that what you're experiencing is fine and that you deserve it. So suddenly when the perpetrator is removed, you're so conditioned to survive under that you really don't have any way of figuring a path forward out on your own. And that's why I think therapy and counseling or talking to safe people, and safe people on that point, learning who safe people are. You know, no one really knows that when you've been in a situation that there's a lot of shame or there's terror there. I think I'm just getting to the point where I can be as I am in front of people. In fact, I'm in graduate school at the moment, and I, as a joke, a few days ago, hip-hop danced. I always wanted to dance in front of people, but I'm too scared to. So I did in front of the class, and it was really silly, and I'm a terrible dancer. But the point was that, for me, it was a small victory. And I think that's what I always tell my trauma survivors. It's about these little bets, because for me, it was like, okay, I did this, I'm terrible at it, but it's a time that I'm okay to be myself in front of people, and that's a pretty big accomplishment for someone who's been hidden for most of their lives.
Robyn, there are many people for them to be able to speak on stage is quite traumatic,
Right.
and they feel if I go, I'm going to make a fun of
Right,
myself, and
right.
they might be very confident in other areas of life, but speaking is not their forte, so they just want to stay away from it. They want to avoid it. But nowadays, more and more, the world is being designed in such a
Right.
fashion that you end up finding yourself, even if it's a social gathering or maybe your office setting. So how do you help people in overcoming that sense of nervousness?
Yeah, that's a very common problem. Fear of public speaking is still up there, higher than death in the list of people's personal fears. And one of the interesting things that I discovered in my studying of neuroscience is like the basis of that can be related to the fact that when you are vulnerable, and this is all vulnerabilities actually, we're a tribal society. You know, we have evolved because we lived in a tribe and people have helped us. Part of that fear of public speaking is humiliating yourself in front of your tribe members. And if you humiliate yourself in front of your tribe members, in the past you were kicked out of the tribe. If you're kicked out of the tribe, you can't survive. You can't eat, you can't sleep, there's no protection. So that's where some of the fear comes from. And so one of the ways that I help people get over it is to see that that's part of the fear, just to recognize it, and then to say, okay, I'm not going to get kicked out of the tribe, and back to our original theme of purpose. You know, when you stand in front of people, you should be standing in front of people to give them something. Mm-hmm. If you have something to give, if you have something to share, if what you have to give to those people are going to make them different, better, more valuable, know something, understand something at the end of your speech, that's what you concentrate on. And when you have that sense of purpose, the fear dissolves, because then it's not about you. It's about what you're giving. It's not about what you're getting back from them. So that's one of the ways that you can really overcome that fear.
So enjoy yourself wherever you are. That becomes possible only when you are clear about who you are or what is the purpose of whatever you are trying to accomplish. So Jessica, share with us your experience of working with people with stories in particular. So anywhere you felt that by sharing their story, people felt it is easier to find the purpose?
Yeah, I think so. How I'll Go First came together is that I had been working in the field for about 10 years with doing sex trafficking survivor work, and had gotten an email while I was out in the field in Cambodia actually, and they asked if I would come back to the United States and give a speech about my personal history, and I hadn't done that yet. I'd only ever talked about sex trafficking. And so I was joking to a friend of mine who was in the field with me, and I said to her, you know, this group wants me to come and share my personal story, and it's really, you know, I don't know, I feel really, I don't want to do it. And she looked at me and she said, well, look who's still stuck in the brothel. And I was shocked and confused by that statement. And she went on to say, you know, you look at all of these survivors that you work with, you're always telling them to not be ashamed of where they came from and that they can overcome. So, you know, what are you going to do about it? And I said, fine, I'll go first. And so I came back to the States and ended up giving this speech. And I was so nervous, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to offer the audience. And afterwards, I had a group of people that came up, and then all of them wanting to share their story of, I've never told anyone this, but, and then their long history of child abuse or sexual violence. And then at the very end, a guy came up to me and he said, you don't understand, this morning I woke up and I decided I was going to kill myself. And on the last whim, I decided to come to this speech. I had no idea that you were going to be here. And I was sort of like, I had no idea I was going to be here either. And he said, if you can do it, then I can do it too. If you can survive, I can too. And I just thought to myself, wow, there's something so powerful in being authentic, offering our vulnerability to each other and saying, this is where I came from. You know, if I can do it, you can do it, and here's how.
If you can do it, how can I can do it? That it's a kind of a rhythm of inspiring each other, and that rhythm creatively helps in expressing as well as connecting with what is it that I am actually here for. Now, from this point of view, what we have talked so far, each individual is unique, Robyn. So when we say finding purpose, so there is no straight formula or a particular frame which would fit for everyone. So
Right.
each one needs to work on their own way of finding. So how these other tools are helpful, for example, interacting with Jessica or you?
Yeah. So it's all about getting the right answers and asking the right questions. And when I coach people sometimes, because I coach them for interviews, and there was a stark example that came to me because I had two young girls who were going into medical school. And I had them almost at the same time, and I was asking them why they wanted to be doctors and preparation for their interviews. And one of them wanted to be a doctor because her father had suffered cardiac arrest, and she really wanted to be inventive around cardiology and all of this. The other one wanted to be a doctor because somebody had created a lot of diseases, or she was really interested in immunology. So it was really fascinating to have these two girls, so that if they were going to the interview for med school, people would ask them, why do you want to be a doctor? They both wanted to be doctors, but they had such specific different reasons that when we worked together, it's like one gave this very succinct answers about why she wanted to be a doctor, because she loved biology and she loved finding the immunology part of it and how helpful that would be in the medical profession. The other really wanted to have an innovative way to deal with heart disease and family trauma. So that's an instance of like, there's so many jobs, but a lot of people have jobs, but you're in that job or you're in that career or they're in that profession for very specific reasons, unique reasons to you. And one of the things that you want to do is really ask yourself questions. And an interesting exercise is to go back to when you were 8 or 9 years old. And when you're 8 or 9 years old, sometimes things happen to you that then can then lead you in the direction that you're meant to be. And a lot of times we tend to forget what those things are. And if you really start to focus, it's like, okay, when I was 8 or 9, I think and I can't remember the exact ages because they're men and women, it's the slightly different ages. But you want to think about what it was, what was passionate about, what you were passionate about that back then. I've had somebody who was an organizer, and she remembers as a teenager like taking her hair ties and putting them in complete organized places and color-coded. You know, that's something that she remembered, and now that's what she does for a living. You know, so we do have purpose.
So the purpose is revealed to you when you are very young. That's what I learned from what I just heard from Robyn. Maybe true. may not be true, may not be true, because truth is infinite and it has infinite ways of revealing it. And Jessica, when we're talking again about finding purpose and taking a cue from what she just said, most of the time we think that you have to take care of your bills. You have to pay the bills. So all that we think about is how to make money. Does that help? Or and sometimes if one is not thinking like that, there would be people around him or her telling them that they are being impractical. So the idea of being practical and yet being purposeful, can they go together?
I think they definitely can. I think they definitely can. One example that comes to mind is this field of social entrepreneurship. And social entrepreneurship is the field where we're using entrepreneurship and business to address social justice issues. And so much of why we use business plus, I would say, our passions and what gets us excited, and like the two stories you just heard about, this girl who wants to figure out immunology and biology, those two girls, that's a great example of business meeting passion. And in my personal case, for example, I'll go first, is about storytelling, but at the end of the day, it's about storytelling that plus neuropsychology, and it's using a sustainable business model to make to really help people at the end of the day. So yeah, I think they can be married together, and even within a business or a job that you are doing, and maybe you don't have like a specific passion for the job, but you've found that niche within it. And Robyn, she and I were just talking about this before we got onto the show, just about how you find your passion within the job that you already are doing.
And how do you do that?
Yeah, I work with a lot of people that are in jobs and in careers, and I think it may not be like this passionate, like Jessica or even myself. It's like it may not be that, but you have a purpose. Sometimes your purpose is to be a great leader within your team. And so to share that teamwork and to share that vulnerability within an organization so that you can encourage everybody in the team. Sometimes it's the end client. Even if you're crunching numbers for a social service agency, without those numbers being crunched, the people at the end of that service do not get served. So sometimes it's really for you to look and think, this job may seem like a boring dead-end job, but without me doing it, all of these things don't happen. So it is possible for you to dig deep and think, okay, what is the purpose that I'm fulfilling in this job, even though it may not be as dramatic or as glamorous as some other jobs may be. You can still figure out what you are meant to do and why in that position.
So we can safely say that we need people who are happy in this world. More and more people should be happy, because happy people would not be violent is an underlying assumption with which I am saying that we need happy people, because there is so much violence around us. Sometimes all the top 5-7 news items that we have on television or in the newspaper, they are related to somebody either having killed by somebody. We need to have people who know that living in harmony with each other is natural, and that shouldn't be something that needs to be achieved in an extraordinary fashion. From that point of view, connecting your experience of having worked with people who were in the situation of domestic violence, how do you see where the happiness comes from?
Well, something I've been thinking about during this interview is this idea of self-care versus self-indulgence. And when I work with constituents, and even in my own personal life, I've been sort of trying to figure out what is the difference between the two. Because if you're in a job that you can't get out of, and you're trying to find the purpose within it and the passion and get excited about it, and you're sort of like building yourself up like, okay, I can do this. Part of a holistic mental health plan is including this idea of good self-care. But I think there's a confusion often in the press, and that self-care equals like watching TV or going to eat sugary foods or going to sleep, and those things actually perpetuate this feeling of shame, this feeling of stuckness, because you're not changing your emotional state. So when what I always encourage people is to figure out what you have fun doing? You know, what do you really enjoy? Connect with your friends, go out and explore something, because that's actually doing something chemically in our brains where it's changing our emotional state, and that will help perpetuate this idea of finding purpose and happiness. You know, at the end of the day, we say that, you know, we need people who have come alive, because the world needs that, people who are alive and who are able to show up for their life, who are able to go first in their life, and figure out what it is that will help themselves but also do good for their communities and their families.
Robyn, share your journey in finding the different role for yourself, from being an actor to a communication coach. That transition probably also was after some sort of inner search and figuring out that this is something which would be more satisfying.
Right. Well, the thing with me is, like, I started off as incredibly shy. So I was like the shyest child in the entire neighborhood. That shy, I mean, a lot of people who read my blogs or follow me, it's like shy was my literal nickname. So I had to totally reinvent myself, because as a shy person, I got to see how you get ignored when you're shy. You know, when no one expects you to say anything, then people don't come to you anymore. At the same time, as that was happening, I got to observe how people did interact with each other. That taught me a lot. But so I had to transition from that shy person to the actress, and then as an actress, I was still had a little bit of that shyness, and I didn't feel as fulfilled, because as an actress, you are at the beck and call of other people. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to help people get out of their shyness. And so when I started teaching and when I started training, I was like, this is the mixture of everything that I love. It's like I love performing and I love helping people get out of being stuck. Because as a shy person, I was stuck in that role. And so now what I do is I help people to get unstuck in the roles that they may be stuck in. And so that's what I believe is so important in what you were talking about before, happiness, of finding out what makes you happy. And communication is a huge part of it, because I think that most of the unhappy people that are out there that are evil and doing all of this is because they're not being heard. And they're not being heard because no one's listening, because no one's communicating to them. And so that whole cycle of communication has fallen apart so much in society, and that's what I think creates so many unhappy people. So one of the things, like, we're suppressing things, like with my clients, you can see when they're suppressing emotions, where they're suppressing feelings, it's very difficult for them to be happy.
So in order for you to be happy, there should be someone listening to you. So yeah. I'm happy that you are listening, and you can also add happiness by being a good listener. What you have heard so far, Jessica, the way people share their stories in different parts of the world, do you see any distinct difference as far as India and America are concerned?
I think that it's hard to bear witness to each other's stories, good or bad. There's a tendency, no matter what culture you're in, to want to fix the problem that you're hearing. And I think part of what makes a great empathic listener, and I think that's what we're all trying to do, is this idea of bearing witness to the journey of someone and to the evolution of somebody. So hearing what they're saying, not offering the response, and we often say in counseling, not truncating their emotions, which means you're crying and I offer you a Kleenex, because this gesture is really saying to you, I'm too uncomfortable with how you're feeling, and I want to fix it, but it's too intolerable for me, so please, like, I need you to stop. And the idea of, like, the more comfortable we can become with ourselves and our own areas of shame, the more comfortable we can be with other people and walking with them. We often say with trauma survivors, you know, you can only be as free with someone else as you are with yourself. So it really starts with you, and then being able to offer that presence for someone else, as to be a good listener. But I think in general, people just feel uncomfortable, whether in India or whether you're in the United States, of what it means to hear the hard parts of each other's life stories.
So these are interesting and simple yet complicated areas. That is where the beauty of life lies, in its uncertainty, and also the opportunity that it offers for us to evolve and see what is the most beautiful picture that can emerge out of the permutation combination that is given to us, and we are much more powerful, creative and superior to all the super computers. When I say that, I am also aware of the consciousness which is unique gift for human beings. And as we move towards the concluding part of this conversation, any tip from both of you, starting from you, Robyn, how one should make any small change to make life more meaningful and beautiful?
Wow, that's a big order. And I believe to make life more meaningful and beautiful is to create your own story and live it fully. And there's an exercise I just gave a client recently, is to tell your story like a fairy tale. You know, so that's something that you can do. Once upon a time there was. And so you take that story either from the beginning or from the middle or the end. You can start from the end sometimes and go backwards. What do you want to achieve? What can you envision for yourself? And you can bring in all of the stuff that happened. Once there was a girl named Robyn who was so shy that was her nickname. And then one day she decided to try out for a play. And after that, until then one day she became a public speaker and a communication coach, and she lived happily ever after. So that's one of the stories that you can start to tell for yourself. And the more you work on all of those things, the more you can start to reveal and own what it is that you're meant to do. And it sort of goes in with this theme. One of my favorite things, which I want to distinguish what a lot of people will say, fake it till you make it. That's a phrase that I really have a problem with, because neurologically, brain science-wise, nobody wants to be fake. So what I have rebranded that statement to my own statement that says, own it while you hone it. So own what it is that you have while you still continue to polish it. And that's one of the things that is going to propel you further.
So be true to yourself, own it, and move on. And Jessica, your quick comments.
I would say, I would ask you to write your story from the beginning. You know, where your parents met, how they got married, or if they didn't, and then from infant all the way to where you are now, and then become an observer of your story. You know, I often tell my clients, you know, if they're looking for love, I always say, are you the person you're looking for is looking for? And I think that can be true even if you're not looking for love. You know, are you observing your story? Are you finding themes and patterns? Are you noticing within yourself, like, oh, that's an area that I'd really like to address? And then I would invite you to get the help, to talk to safe people and say, you know what, I'm not going to let that hold me back anymore. I want to live this full life and find my purpose.
So the purpose is that you be the greatest that you are, and reveal your greatness to the world. On that note, as we conclude this show with the theme Finding Purpose, here are a few lines from Swami Vivekananda taken from the book Inspired Talks. And he says, when your mind is in the highest state, you are unconscious of it. Accumulate power in silence and become a dynamo of spirituality. What can a beggar give? Only a king can give, and he only when he wants nothing himself. So on that note of a sense of fulfillment and completeness and a doorway to perfection, I have the pleasure of thanking Jessica Minhas for joining us and sharing wonderful ways of arriving at your purpose. And Robyn, such a pleasure having you. Thank you very much, with lots of good wishes to both of you. Thanks to all of you for joining us. This is Ashok Vyas.